He had nearly lost control of himself. He'd lost his mind. He was amazed at his very own lack of willpower. It was as though he were possessed by some unknown force that caused him to do what he knew went against every principle he had ever known. But he couldn't help himself. It was a fear of being different, the fear that someone might find out what he was really like, what he really needed and wanted, what haunted his soul and body. That's what made him do it. The having to be the same, to give into the crowd, giving into the demand to follow set up by the emperor. He could literally lose his life if he refused to blend in. He hated the choices that he forced himself to make. The smell of fresh bread normally would excite him, but today Joshua could not stomach it. He ate breakfast merely because it was there. Today was the day. His hand shook along with his trembling heart as he took up the pouch. The coins jingled one by one as he carefully counted out the day's deed. He began to walk. He walked down the street of his hometown, Capernaum. He walked slowly and deliberately, as if with every step he was stepping on nails, piercing the bottoms of his feet. His shoulders were weighted. His thoughts were, well, not light either. Flashes of terror from his childhood in his mind's eye convulsed his body, remembering the agony, seeing the torture, the blood, the mutilated bodies, the crying children left behind by the Roman soldiers. A nagging hunger seized the pit of his stomach, remembering himself and other children left without bread. And yet his feet walked on. Joshua was jolted back to reality by the stench of raw sewage running down the gutter into which he had inadvertently stepped. Sitting next to the trickle were two small children. The sight of their matted hair, the runny noses, the thin, frail little bodies sank the pit of his stomach to a new low. The previously gobbled breakfast sticking now in his throat. The Romans caused this poverty. The Romans caused this poverty. Their overtaxing, using every resource of his people as if everything was their own. The Roman soldiers putting first claim on anything that entered the marketplace while cursing God. Why? Why must these children hunger for bread? Why should the towns thirst for clean water while Herod, the collaborator with Rome, hoarded it for his swimming pools? The mothers of these children were doubtless gone on the long trek to do the back-breaking work of hauling enough water home to cook with, assuming there was anything to cook. It isn't fair. God, it isn't fair. And yet he walked on. The toll gate was in sight now. It was here where the tax monies were collected to do the evil deeds. Joshua was caught short by the sound of jingling coins. He turned to see who next would contribute to the demise of children and good honest people through the Roman god of evil and enslavement. It was then that he realized that the jingle of coins came from the pouch that he had so neatly tied to his own waist. The jingle of the coins that would eventually be Roman coins that bought the ships, the swords, the instruments of torture, the crossbars and nails to make the crosses on which dissenters were slowly and agonizingly put to death. The sound of jingling coins. It caused an ache in his stomach and in his heart, made his throat parch and swallowing more difficult. And now he was no longer walking, he was running. He was crazy with compassion and anger and hatred and love. He screamed in torment, though he could not be sure if the screaming was in his head or if everyone could hear it. He was driven by anguish, ripping at what felt like his body, crying to God to stop ripping him apart. "What do you want with me?" he heard himself scream, and on he ran. His staggering footsteps crossed the threshold of the synagogue, and his eyes met the eyes of Jesus as his heart cried out once again, "What do you want from me? Will you destroy me, God?" In his path stood the rugged demeanor of a man already known for his gentleness, for his compassion, and his resistance of the evil that seemed to envelop the rest of the world. Joshua's heart skipped a beat and then suddenly strangely calmed as those loving eyes met his tortured face. The voice was calm, saying simply, "Be quiet." Despite the thumping, crying heart, Joshua's wild cry ceased. The load began to lift. The coins ceased to jingle. The tears that trickled down his face seemed to wash away the guilt of 1,000 crosses. Again, Joshua walked on. But now his feet and his heart took him in a different direction. With a new determination, he followed behind the God who was reflected in those loving, gentle eyes. He walked past and away from the toll gate, with its gilt over nails and crossbars, following a narrow path toward healing of his memories, toward the healing of bodies and minds and the feeding of the hungers of his own body and spirit and of the tortured people around him. Eventually, toward a small hill and another cross. On this new walk, he witnessed the feeding and nurture of thousands. Won't you come and walk with him? Listen behind Jesus. Listen to what he says. Leave behind your weapons, your pain, your guilt, your fear. Leave behind all the evils and uncertainties of this world, because here is the bread of life. You need never hunger. Share it with the multitudes. Allow only the jingle of the words of life to fill your ears and minds and hearts. Be quiet. Let these words calm your spirit. Know that God is here. God's words are always true. God's ways are always just. God is with us, and we cannot be the same. The prayer for today was written by Cheryl Christolitis in 2003. I have been named too long as unclean, Lord. Unclean are those who are threatened by your presence, who run away from your touch in their lives. I do not. I place myself where you cannot help but see me, daring you to ignore my angry, fearful yearning. I know who you are. You're the one with the power to reach into my soul and see the tears and the scratches and the scrapes and the gouges and have me screaming at the world. I wait for you to name my fears and call forth the rage with which I have wounded myself and inflicted others. I wait for you to transform my pain and restore me to myself with 100 million others through thousands of years. I wait to be named clean and whole in city streets and silent back alleys, in crisis centers and psychiatric hospitals, in shopping malls and on park benches. I wait for you or anyone to see me as I truly am and call me home to what I might become.